It is 4 o'clock and we're going to start. I'm going to try to run through this beginning material quickly because we kind of ran out of time yesterday and we might do it again. We might be pressed for time. This is the Los Angeles InDesign user group. This is session 2 of adding interactivity to InDesign documents. Yesterday, we talked about InDesign, interactivity in InDesign straight out of the box without any plugins. Today, we're going to talk about interactivity using Infi, written by today's speaker, Justin Putney. Our hosts are Randy, Alvin, and me. Randy is here. Randy?
Yes.
Okay, there he goes.
Hi, hello everyone.
We have an advisory board. Here are the 9 people on the advisory board. Skipping through it. This, though, I want to say that we have people who make this happen: Adobe, Marksware, Extensis, Text Expander, InMotion, Mighty Deals, and Ajar, sponsors that without them, we might not be here. And that also applies to people like you who do the donations. That pays for Zoom, it pays for MailChimp and postage and other things. Thank you very, very much. Here are our social media handles. We need somebody to help us out with social media. It kind of just sits there. We need somebody to help jumpstart that. We have raffle prizes, which we will talk about later. You must be present to win. You can't just come in at the end, not attend the presentation, and then expect to be part of a raffle. And with that, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Justin.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'm going to start sharing my screen right away. Flip back to the presentation. As Alan mentioned, we are on day 2. Today, we're going to focus on Infi. Yesterday, of course, we covered all the general InDesign interactivity, and we're going to build on that with the things that are unique to Infi that it supports in addition to all of the basic InDesign interactivity. So we're going to look at creating flipbook animation. Yesterday we looked at object states and multi-state objects, and I'm going to show you some of the tools in Infi that make those more complicated multi-state object creations much easier to build. And we'll look at 3D Flipcards. Look at some of the other things. These are carryovers from Adobe DPS in a way, the slideshows and the swipeable image sequences. Infi supports those, and we'll show you what those look like. And we'll take a look at what it takes to create responsive layouts with InDesign and Infi. And then finally, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what it takes to host the files on your own site, and some of the other options you have in terms of what your content can become. Because it's HTML, we can turn it into all kinds of stuff. So we'll get into that. And just as with yesterday, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat pod, and I will count on Myra and April to call them out to me if it makes sense. Please feel free to jump in, and I'll be happy to answer those as we go along. But you're also welcome to save up questions. I'll try and save a little bit more time for questions at the end today. So let's get started talking about, well, the interactive stuff. Let me back up and let's go through those first. So creating page curls. This is super easy. It's almost making a false advertisement in terms of creating it, because all it is really is selecting an option. So today we're going to be working with a more complicated file than yesterday. It's basically the same thing, but it's a finished version. And at least to start off with, I'm going to work with this file that has two layouts. So here's our original layout. It's the landscape view. And I've got a portrait one in here that's a second layout. And because the Flipbook comes 2 pages as a spread, I'm going to export this portrait version because I think it's just going to look a lot better. So that's just a heads up. So everything we're doing with In5 is going to come from this In5 menu. As I mentioned, everything we did yesterday was available under Window Interactive. And so today we're going to be focusing on the In5 menu, which is installed after you install In5 and restart InDesign. This menu shows up. So most of the time when you're starting out and you want to export your file, you can use the Easy Export Wizard. Let me just go ahead and save this. And this is what it looks like. It basically asks, what are you making? So in this case, we would say Flipbook, and we click Next. Now I'm going to jump out of this wizard momentarily, because you'll see at the bottom, it's detected that I have responsive layouts, and it's applied that. I have 2 of these. Again, this is the Easy Export Wizard, so I don't have a ton of control. If I wanted full control, I would go up and say Export HTML5 with In5. That's the full dialog. But I can access it from here. I can in fact choose options, like going through here, Flipbook, and I'll say I want pixel perfect text. And of course, I could go next and give it a name. And before I export, I can switch to the advanced dialog. And when I do that, it'll take those options that I selected and apply them in the dialog. So this one can be a little bit daunting. And that's the reason I created the Easy Export window, because you don't actually have to set everything in here. And we won't spend a lot of time covering everything you can do in here. I'll mention some of the things as we go along. But this gives us a little more control. And the reason I'm doing it in this particular case is because, as I mentioned, I have this more complex document with 2 layouts that you can see in the Pages panel. And I just want to export one of those layouts as my Flipbook. So I'm going to go up to Responsive Layouts, and I'm going to choose the iPad vertical layout, because that's the one I want to look like a Flipbook. And then I also want to make sure that I put it in a specific folder, because I already have a place for my finished output. And so I want to call this my Flipbook. So I will create that folder and say that's going to be where I'm putting it. And then I'm not going to do much else. I'll show you in the advanced that I've got scaling turned on. That came about because the Easy Export Wizard had that as part of the settings. But I am going to turn off the image optimization, just because everything will export a lot faster when I do that. So I'll just click OK. And this one this one I haven't pre-baked, so we're actually going to see what it looks like to export it fully. It's going to go through every page. In this case, I've chosen to export the text frames as images, so they're going to render exactly as they do in the InDesign layout. I do, of course, have the option to export live text, but that, generally speaking, requires a little bit more setup to ensure, consistency of appearance and that kind of thing. So I just love exporting as images for a quick export, and then I'll just click open when it's done, and you can see I have a Flipbook. So that's all I had to do, and now I have a working Flipbook. All the things that we looked at yesterday, the table of contents works, the video works, the scrolling framework. So everything is the same. It's just now a Flipbook. And you can see these animations are playing automatically. The Flipbook. I don't think we looked at all these pages in the vertical view, so you can see what they look like now. And there's the 3D flip card, which we're going to look at today. And there's our image sequence that we're that I'm moving around by swiping. Right, so that's really all it takes to make a flipbook. You can see down at the bottom here the black bar. That's the viewer control bar. So that looks kind of similar to the options that Publish Online has. And this is something that In5 adds because in the easy export window, we said we're creating a flipbook, which is a type of digital magazine. And so it selected all the options that look like a digital magazine for us. So this is what we chose here. And then in the full dialog under the viewer display, it selected all these options for us. We can, of course, customize it by changing the color of the frame. We can make it a branded color. We can add a logo. We can have a progress bar, change the color of that. I think we talked a little bit about PDF download yesterday. That's an option that's available. And so there's a lot of different things you can do, but actually making the flipbook is really simple. We just have our InDesign layout and we choose that option as we export. Oh, and now just to point it out too, since I didn't make a point of saying it, the flipbook is found if you're in the full dialog under the page format here. So there are different page formats. The slider is more of an app-based look. So we saw that yesterday with some of our projects. Let me switch back to those. So like this one is a slider with the fade in transition. So you can see the pages are fading in between. And there are these different formats. The borderless page scroll is what you'd use if you're making like a one-page website. We've got a video course coming out in about a month about that. So you can create something that looks and functions exactly like a website using this format. And in these other ones, continuous scroll looks kind of like a PDF document inside a PDF reader. And if anybody wants to get into that, we can do that. But this is essentially the flexibility of HTML. All you're doing is choosing a different option. In5 under the hood is applying some different CSS and some different JavaScript so that your pages behave in different ways. So that's what allows you to create all kinds of different types of content. I will also mention there's the liquid format, which supports the liquid layout rules. Somebody had mentioned that, I think, in the chat yesterday. I won't get into the liquid layout rules. I have a bunch of videos on that. That was introduced before websites were truly responsive. So it's kind of a half measure, but fortunately you can combine it with the responsive layouts, which we're going to talk about later today. And those two together make a very responsive combination. And like I mentioned, I have a video on that. And if anybody wants to talk about that more, yeah, we can definitely get into that into the question and answer section. So now let's take a look at how we can create some easy pop-ups and other things that we were looking at yesterday, creating manually with multi-state objects. So let me flip back to a starting file and let's just go to the single layout, keep everything simple. And I'm going to go to this page that has pop-ups. And let's just imagine we don't have any pop-ups set on here. There we go. It's always a trick to find where that multi-state object is. So now I have it selected. And the way I can tell this is the multi-state object selected, by the way, is it has this fat dotted line. So InDesign tries to give you little hints as to what you're selecting. So as an example, this button here has this icon with the button and the pointer icon. And then if I hover over this, you can see there's a dotted line. This particular dotted line goes with a button. You see it sometimes, I think it's a thinner dotted line with groups. And you see there's a really fat one with multi-state objects. So that's just something to watch out for as you're working with these interactive features. InDesign tries to give you clues as to where things are and what you have selected, but they're pretty subtle. So now let's create a pop-up. Normally what we do, we talked about this yesterday, is we'd create a starting rectangle. Maybe we'd create all of our content and group it together, go to our object states panel, create a brand new state, and then we could use the tool that I have that's added in here where you could add an empty state, or I showed you at the end of yesterday. That might have been in the QA section. And so we could build all of that manually and have a little help with this option, but it takes a little while. And so what if we want to jumpstart that? Well, we can go up to In5 and go down to the Build Wizards and select the pop-up builder. And this gives me several options to start out with. I can choose a UI color. So if I want this to be, usually a pop-up sits on something, and it generally, as a basic theme, is dark or light. So we can choose one of those. We can choose what size dialog box, if we want one at all. I'm going to choose a large one, and I'll keep the drop shadow selected, the rounded corners, and I'll have this apply object styles. Now, I may have some of these object styles in here already, but we'll see. The nice thing is, with that selected, it means I can edit the styles in the document, and they will ripple through. So if I have multiple pop-ups in my document, then it will change the style of all of them. And if I even delete them or I create a new one, it's going to have that same style. So let me go in here and we'll do a, for instance, so this, I can tell that this is the rounded rectangle that is the pop-up. So let's suppose I liked the dark theme with the background, but I actually want I want the box that holds my pop-up to be white. So let me go in here and just change that to paper. And so now you can see I've got this dark background it's partially transparent. It's going to cover my content, and I've got this white background. And so with that selected, if I go into the object styles, you can see that I have this folder that's automatically been created for me. It says pop-up styles, and pop-up dialog is there. And I'm going to right click and say redefine style. And so just to show you, if I wanted to then go create a pop-up on another page, I'd go to Build Wizards, say pop-up builder, and just leave everything. Maybe this one will be small, or it could be large. Let's keep it large, just like I did. Let's say build it. And now when it built the second one, it made everything the same except this window is white. So you can see there's a huge advantage in using the styles. There's a huge amount of power. And you can see also that this, I happen to have this close button selected. That already comes set up with a go-to state, and it sets the pop-up to empty, right? So that's going to effectively close the pop-up. So this is already set up with all the interactivity you need to make a pop-up. So let me just undo this, and that'll get rid of the second pop-up. Let's just work with the first one. So to actually work with it on screen, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to object states and select the empty state. So that hides it away. You can see now the rectangle inside the empty state is selected up here at the top where I'm moving my mouse and where those blue lines are. And now let's have one of these buttons open that pop-up just so we can see what that looks like and see what it takes to make it function. So I've selected this. I think this is already a button. There might be multiple objects here. Yeah, they might be stacked on top of each other. Let me just click the plus button to add an action, and let's go ahead and say go to state. And we want to select the pop-up. Now there's multiple pop-ups on this, so let me check. Maybe I should give this a better name, just like we talked about yesterday. So instead of this generic one, I'm going to say this is our new pop-up that we've created. This is our custom one. And that way it'll be easier for me to reference it. So here I'm going to select new pop-up, and I want to tell it to go to the pop-up state. So now let's preview that. So preview is going to take a second to load up, and I think that's fresh because InDesign is freshly open, so I don't need to click the play button. Maybe I do. Let's see. And for some reason, nothing is happening there. And I wonder if my button just isn't, well, that's that. wonder if this is sitting on top of it. Let's see. Yeah, I had this button sitting on top of that. So let me just delete that. There's our button with the go-to state. Let's now try it again, make sure that other button isn't blocking it. That's something you'll see a lot in interactivity. If you have something else interactive on top of something, it'll block the pop-up. So there's our pop-up, and it's working. I don't have any content in there right now, but that's easy to add because I've just taken care of all the hard stuff. So I can close the pop-up with that X button. You can also see this is set up. It's maybe less apparent in this one. Yeah, but the pop-up is so big. Let's go. Oh, I did want to mention that the menu is sitting on top of the pop-up. So if we wanted to change that, this is all InDesign content. So let's look in our layers panel and see that here's our pop-up. This layer right here, let's just move it up above our home button and our compact menu. So it's the absolute topmost item. Go back to the EPUB preview and refresh that, clicking the play button. And now when we click on it, it covers the menu as well. So, you know, we're still dealing with all InDesign elements. So it's all the tools that you know and love. So that's what it takes to easily create a pop-up with the pop-up builder. You might have noticed when we were in there that there's also a slideshow builder. And let's take a look at that right now. I'm going to skip over the 3D flip card and we'll come back to that momentarily. So let me find the page with our slideshows and I'll show you how these are set up. So you might remember each of these had animation on them. So they're each multi-state objects. They have animation applied. There's 3 different ones here. And if I go up to Infi and go to interactive widgets, you'll see there are a whole bunch of tools. Now the ones up in the basic section above the first divider, these are all things that you may have been familiar with if you had used Adobe's DPS back in the day, the digital publishing solution / suite. And these are Infi's updated version of these. So it supports all the things that you would expect there. And in some cases, like with the video we looked at, it adds a whole bunch more options. So let's take a look at the slideshow. So here is a slideshow, and I've got all my settings. It just auto plays. All 3 of these do. I can turn off autoplay and have it play when I tap or pause. The content itself, these are just multi-state objects, and the slideshow panel controls how they play. Now I could have them change with a swipe instead of autoplay or tap. You can have them play in reverse. I mean, just kind of all the options you'd expect for a slideshow, and it's pretty easy to set up once you have a multi-state object. If we look at this, we can just see, you know, basically it's the same picture, it's showing different doctors. And so it's cross-fading between these images of the different doctors, and each one of these multi-state objects, which you can't really see here, does that. And they all have slideshow properties applied. So once you have a multi-state object, that's all it takes to set up a slideshow. Well, let's take a look at what we would do if you wanted to create a slideshow from scratch. So Infi also has a build wizard for the slideshow. So let me go to the slideshow builder. Now, if you happen to have an image folder with a bunch of images in it that you want to be part of a slideshow, you can just click here to browse. And I don't want to spend the time searching for an image, so I'm just going to leave this blank, and you'll see what it does. It creates some cool placeholders. And so all you have to do is use InDesign's place command to fill them in. But Infi will create all of the interactivity, and you'll notice there's playback settings here, which we just saw in the slideshow panel. So it will automatically set up all these for you as it creates the slideshow. It can also set up navigation buttons and thumbnails automatically. So I'll go ahead and build it. and you can see this. So it recognizes that I didn't put anything in there. So it asks me how many images I want to have. I'll just say 6. So it's going to create placeholders for 6 different things. And you can see as it's building, it's adding live buttons. And then it tells me I can, of course, look at the slideshow widget to add additional settings. So now with this selected, you can see that it has configured this as a slideshow. And each one of these is a button. So let me just close the slideshow panel for now. And you can see this button is to set up to go to a specific state in the slideshow. So this one goes to placeholder 2. This big object has all these placeholders in it, or they're called placeholder because that's how I set it up. And the back and next buttons have go to previous state and go to next state applied. So that's a really quick way to set up slideshow without going through the rigmarole of creating all of the interactive pieces yourself. All right, so I think, well, let me look at the time. And since we've got the time, I'm going to show you really quickly what it takes to set up an interactive menu with this, because that's also really cool. Also in the build wizards, there is the menu builder. There's 3 different types of menus. You can make a compact one, which is what you think of as like a hamburger menu. You can have a menu that comes in from the outside, the right outside of the page, or you can have a top bar. And this one, I already have the compact menu. Why don't we go ahead and create a sliding door menu to see what that looks like. So options are similar to the pop-up builder. And I want to use bookmarks, but I could also, just like I did for the table of contents yesterday, I could use a paragraph style. So I could use the, I believe it was the section title that we did yesterday. But I'll just go ahead and use the bookmarks that the table of contents created. So I'm going to create build it. Again, it's going through creating actual buttons, actual multi-state objects that you can edit after the fact. And here's the menu. And I will mention the things that that I was talking about initially. So like the slideshow, the things that are up here, these widgets are in5 specific, and they are not something you'll see in the EPUB interactivity preview. You'll actually have to export with in5 to see those. So that's worth mentioning. But this menu is pure InDesign. So if I go to the interactivity preview and load it again, you can see here's a menu and it animates in. And this is something I was kind of referring to yesterday, that the button changes. It's got all these different menu items, and you can close it. It also, I have the ability, this is all styled. So if I went in here and were to change one of these items, let's see what I've got selected. I've got text frame, and it's got this background. Why don't I change that to green and redefine the style? And you can see it redefines all of those. So that's the nice thing about setting this up with all those styles. And then you can, of course, modify this, like in the case of the menu that I have in this document. I have a custom image. I have a little menu icon, and it goes with the medical theme, right? So really easy to go in and update these, but it takes care of building the interactivity. So whether you're a beginner and you don't necessarily know how to create this stuff, this lets you do that. Or if you're an advanced user and you just want to save some time, these build wizards save you a ton of time. All right, so let's go back to the 3D flip card and take a look at that. Here is the page with the 3D flip cards. These are multi-state objects because whenever possible, I try and build the in5 features on top of existing InDesign features. So if I go to the overlays panel, or excuse me, the object states panel, then I have 2 states here. There's a front state and a back state. And to make this into a 3D flip card, all I have to do is to go to in5, interactive widgets, down to 3D flip card, and then I can configure this. So this one happens to be horizontal. When you open it the first time and it finds a 2-state excuse me, a two-state multi-state object, it will have none selected by default. So then I would change this to horizontal or vertical, and that's all I have to do. And then N5 does the rest in terms of creating the actual interactivity for me. So if I go back here and find my Flipcard page, there's what the horizontal one looks like, and here's what the vertical one looks like. I have the vertical one in the vertical layout. All right, so that's how you set up a 3D Flipcard. We talked about the slideshow. Let's take a look at how we can create a swipeable image. So of course the slideshows are swipeable, but what I'm referring to in this particular case is this 3D model of the DNA, which is swipeable. This is an image sequence. So an image sequence is really a special version of a video. And the easiest way to do this is to open a video in Photoshop, and ideally your video starts and ends on a frame, so it has this circular effect, right? So this is a finite number of frames, and remember how much it is. It's maybe 25 frames or something, but it ends basically where it starts. So you never see a seam in terms of the animation. So I open the video in Photoshop, and then I just go to render it as video, and instead of video format, I choose an image sequence. And what that does is give me a series of images, and I might be able to show you in the Finder here. In my finished output, let me go into the images. So these are all the images that N5 has generated, and here are the two image sequences. And this is what gets exported from Photoshop. It's just a numbered sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And yeah, there's 30 images in there. So the way I get that into InDesign, let's go to that last page, close up this stuff. I'm just going to delete this frame entirely, and I will go up to the Infi menu, and I will go to Interactive Widgets and to the image sequence. And it gives me instructions. It says select a rectangle to get started. So I'm just going to create any rectangle. It doesn't matter what size, because InDesign is actually automatically going to size this to my images. So you want to think about this when you're in Photoshop exporting it, what your canvas size is, so that it's going to fit into your layout here. So then I'll just select an image directory, and rather than going and looking for my original, I'm just going to be a snake eating its tail and go in and find one of the sequences here. And I believe this one will work. This may be the portrait one, but let's just go ahead and do it. I'll click open, and you can see it's rendered it. And I'll just move it in place. And there you have it. This is my image sequence ready to go. I can set a frame rate, which will control the speed of the animation. I can tell it whether or not I want to show that first image right away. And you can, of course, have it autoplay. If you just want this to function like it does a movie, but a silent movie, some kind of animation running in the background of your publication, you can do it that way. But this is all it takes. Selected it, you can see by default, it swipes to change the image. I don't have the first and last image set to stop there. And so this just goes in a circle. I'm just going to keep dragging it to the left, and it just keeps spinning because it doesn't stop at the end image. And we have a great course in our premium video library. Keith Gilbert, who I think is going to be at the next LAID meeting, did a whole course on how you can create a 3D model and then use Photoshop to export it and put it in as an image sequence like this. So there is a way to learn more about this, but it's pretty simple. Once you actually have the model, that's the tricky part. All right, so now let's go on to creating a responsive layout. So again, what In5 tries to do as much as possible is piggyback on all of the great existing tools in InDesign. And so the responsive layouts is no different. What In5 uses are alternate layouts. And if you never used alternate layouts before, they're what you were seeing in this other document where I had the portrait version. So these two layouts in the Pages panel, they sit side by side, and you can see they have different names. I can give them names so I can easily recognize them. And typically the way you'd create one of those, let me go and select the first page, and I just click the flyout menu, the arrow here. It's also accessible from, I believe, the Pages panel or the flyout menu right there, or the layout menu, create alternate layout. But this is handy and it just makes sense to me, so I always choose this option here, create alternate layout. It gives me a series of settings, so I can give it a name. By default, it's going to basically change the orientation of the one I have, which is great to start with. And it's going to link the stories together. So if I edit text in one, it updates in the other. Now, if you don't want to do that, if you want to have different text in your other layout, you can unlink that. Otherwise, I'm just going to click OK, and it'll create an alternate layout. And what you'll see when you do that is that the page size has in fact changed, but your layout's a mess. And what you have to do is go in and manually move everything, because all it really does is change the size of the page. So what I've done is, again, piggybacking on the great InDesign features, is I've combined two together. So instead of using that, I would suggest going up to In5 and going to the build wizards and choosing the Magic Layout Builder. Now, this particular feature is available to anybody, even if you have the In5 demo installed. So you don't even need a license to use this feature. And it really just piggybacks on two existing InDesign features. One is what we just looked at, the creating alternate layout. And then there is a mechanism inside InDesign that can automatically adjust layouts. So it just does both of those things for you in sequence. And so the options in this dialog are very similar to the create alternate layout, right? So there's link stories. I can uncheck that here. It's got some commonly used presets, and I can change the name if I want it to say, you know, iPhone vertical or iPad. In this case, this is an iPad. And I will go ahead and build the layout. Now, the result is not going to be perfect, but what you'll see is it's quite good, because now this actually fits on the page. It's not done everything perfectly, but at least my text frame sort of makes sense. So I could go in. In fact, I could probably like select multiple things, because this isn't hanging off the edge of the page now. And I could just say, you know, content aware fit, or fit frame, fit content to frame, fit proportionally. Let's just do content aware and see what it does. Oh, that made a mess. I don't want that. But certainly, I forgot this is several icons. So I can just shrink that down. And of course, this one, I could just do, okay, it just gives me that one option. Anyhow, what I might want to do is actually select this text and manually change it. Because another cool thing about alternate layouts, let me get the whole thing. There we go. The other cool thing about alternate layouts is that when you create them, it creates a bunch of alternate styles. And so, for instance, in my paragraph styles, I now have a title style in the folder that matches the name of the layout. So I can redefine this style, and it will then, I don't know why I'm not seeing the option to redefine that style. It's probably because I've got multiple stuff set there. Let me do that. There we go. Yeah, I forgot there's a character style in this one. So I redefined this title, but I have not redefined the title of my original layout. So if I go to my original layout, it hasn't affected that. So that's another great thing about alternate layouts, is that it creates these alternate styles for you. So as you're changing one layout, you still get all the benefits of the style rippling through that layout, but it doesn't go back and affect your other layout. So that's the bare bones of creating the layout. Now I just have to do the work of going and making this make sense. In this case, I'm only going to create one extra layout, but I could also create as many layouts as I want. I could create a phone layout if I really wanted to. I could have multiple phone layouts. I can have horizontal and vertical. But a couple of important things that you need to know about creating responsive layouts with InDesign and In5. You need to have layouts with different sizes, because that's how In5 is going to know when to swap the layout inside the browser. Another important thing to know is that you have to have matching page numbers. So if, for instance, I deleted this last page on this layout, it's not even going to give me the option to do responsive layouts. And that's because In5 is swapping the layout. So for instance, if I'm on this page and I suddenly scale down and go to a different layout and I didn't have a matching page, In5 wouldn't know where to take the reader. And so that's why you need to have matching pages for the layouts. Now, what you can do is change the size of the pages. So you can make a page less consequential. Like say in a phone layout, it could be, a shorter page. And you can do that with the page tool. You can actually change the size of the pages. Another thing people do with the page tool and page sizes in these layouts is they make tall pages. So if you have a page with a lot of text and you don't want to use the scrolling frame like we used on the second page. So, oops, that's the YouTube embed that we added yesterday. If I didn't want to use the scrolling frame here, let's say I didn't need this text on this, and let me just get rid of that little button. So for this particular layout, I'm going to have this article. So let me actually go in, get the article selected. I'm going to cut it out and then paste it back on the page. And just for the sake of the demo here, I'm going to leave this thin, because if I made it wide like the page, it would fit on the page. So as an alternative, if I don't want to have the scrolling layout for any number of reasons, I can actually change the size of the page. And I like doing that with the page tool. So I will get the page selected. And then there's a key command, which I always forget. I'm going to try figuring it out. If it's Control.
Option.
Thank you, Myra. What I tend to do is go up to the control panel and just like change the pixel values, because I always forget. But thankfully I've got Myra here, so I can hold the Option key, and that's going to keep making this page bigger until my text frame fits. And you can see it's also kind of messing with the layout, so I go in and adjust these things. And now effectively what I have, I made it way too tall. Yeah, you can see it's being it's a little tricky to work with at times. But with some trial and error, you can get it, I promise. So I effectively now have this tall page, and most of the formats that you export will support this. If I zoom out, you can see this page is just tall. Oops, it did all my pages. So clearly I did something wrong. But I can manually change the size of this page and not other pages. I just want to bring that up so you know that you can have variable page sizes. Let me just undo this. Let's just go back to here. So that's just an FYI. And all the page formats, let me just save this, will support that. So on these slider formats, they support that. These continuous scroll ones support that. So people use that a lot in websites. They make taller sections, shorter sections. With this borderless page scroll, all the pages blend together vertically. And so, it's really a neat way to create sections with variable content size. Can't use it with a flipbook, kind of for obvious reasons. All the pages have to be the same size to create that flipbook effect. And you can also create tall pages in liquid layouts. So just a heads up, that's another like hidden tool in InDesign that people don't realize, because when we're creating print documents, obviously they're almost always a uniform page size. So that is another thing to think about. Okay, now when we're getting to exporting the responsive layouts. So creating it has to do with creating an alternate layout, matching page count with differing page sizes. The way you export it, just as I showed at the beginning, the easy export dialog, if you have a plan that's high enough and your document is set up properly, it's just going to tell you you've got responsive layouts detected and they're applied. So all you have to do is select your options and go. Now, if you're going from the full dialog, what you want to do is go to the page range. So if you remember in the export range, when I exported the flipbook, I chose the iPad vertical layout. In this case, I want to make sure that I've selected responsive layouts. And that's what's going to actually export all my layouts and do all the responsive stuff under the hood so that we get this result. And so I want to mention one other thing about this result. In this particular document, I have two layouts. Those two layouts are identical, but they are rotated in terms of orientation. So what Infi is doing is changing the layout based on the orientation. So if I can get the bottom of the page, you can see it has nothing to do with the absolute size, right? It's just when I get to the point, which is challenging to do because of this will only let me get the browser window so small. But once this becomes portrait, it switches to my portrait layout. All right, so that is unique to a 2 layout document with those inverted dimensions. Now, if I had 3 layouts, like if I added a phone layout, it's going to swap based on the width of the page. So I'll have one that's my default, my large one, and at a certain point, I'm going to get to this tablet size, and then if I kept getting smaller, it would get to the phone size. All right, so that is responsive layouts. It's actually pretty simple to export. Most of the work is in setting up your layouts, and of course in your creative thinking in terms of how you're going to change the layouts as they change with different sizes. All right, so let's spend a little bit of time talking about what you do with the files once they've exported, because one of the unique things that Infi does is export your files to your computer. So if I go back, you can see this is what you get when you're all done. There's an index file. I will mention if you want to have a file per page, there is an option when you're exporting. There's a multi-file option that will do, 001.html, 002.html, etc. But generally, most of the options, what you get is one index file and an assets folder. And so anywhere this index file goes, the assets folder has to come with it. Inside the assets folder is CSS, images, JavaScript, and your media. So like your video is in there. Now, and you can ignore this Flash media element. This is old and this is going away. That it used to have, Infi used to have a Flash backup, but that will not be the case anymore because there's no more Flash. And thankfully, all the browsers now support that MP4 file that I talked about yesterday. So you really don't have to know anything about this output, right? Infi has done the coding work for you. All you need to know is that you need to keep this index file and this assets folder together on a relative basis wherever they go. So one of the simplest places they can go is on a website. So if I go to an FTP application like Transmit here, and I open up a location on my FTP, like I'll go into this folder, and just please excuse the amount of stuff here. You can of course have a much simpler FTP. I just happen to have lots of stuff in here. The basics of an FTP application, file transfer protocol, if you're not familiar with it, is just to transfer files as opposed to the HTTP of the web, which is about hypertext. That's the HT. So we've got FT in this case. This is about file transfer. We're getting files from one place to another. And so on the left side, I have local files. On the right side, I have files and folders on my server. So on my server, I can, if I can find my menus are all hidden around Zoom here. So pardon me as I move things around. I can go up and I can add a new folder. And I could just call this LAID, for example. And double click on that. And I can take my assets and my index right from my hard drive and just drag them up here. And it's going to upload all those, and then they'll be available on the web as a URL. Now, in addition to this, there's several other things I can do. If you have more questions about this, we can obviously get into it in the QA. But I did mention that we have this premium video training library. It's called the JAR Academy. In there, there is a completely free course on getting your own web host. So if you have any inclination to do that, this shows you all the steps. Somebody showed me that like when I was starting out, and it just changed my life to be able to have my own website and be able to put things places that I could share with other people. So I share that course totally free. If you're interested in that, you can check that out. Now, if you're in a situation where there's maybe a web department or an IT department that's handling this, well, then basically what you're going to do is just zip up these files, just choose to compress them, and then you're going to post this file, the zip file, somewhere that they can download it and put on their web server. Because all they have to do is drop these files on a web server, and then they'll be able to view it. So let's actually take a look. Since we've gone to the trouble of putting them online, let's take a look. Use one of my short links, and this was in demos, and I called the folder LAID. So let's go there. And so here's the online document. See, it takes a moment to load, and everything's there, functioning, just as it did. And it's of course got the responsive layout in there as well. So now this is a public URL that I can send to anybody. All right, so what are our other options? Let's take a look at those. So in addition to uploading it to your own site, which I just showed you, there's also a free WordPress plugin. So if you happen to have a WordPress site and you don't want to get into the technicals of how to upload to FTP and then embed it in here, there is a much easier way to do it. So let me just delete. This is just my little the test area. And so this happens to be the classic editor, but this works in the block editor. When you install this, you get the same option. You just search for it. It's called Add M5 Embed. And so when I click that, I have access to a library. These are things that I've uploaded before. And I can also add a new one. So why don't I just select an archive? Actually, oops, since I have, let's say, pre-save this, and I don't have to spend the time to find it, I'm just going to go here and grab one of these are just zip files here, where I just selected these and compressed these as if I were going to send them off to my IT department. Same thing with WordPress. I've just zipped this, and I'll just drag it onto here, and it'll upload it. And I have some options. And I won't get into these in great detail. We can certainly talk about them more if you have questions in the Q&A. It's going to try and grab things from your document to assess the height and all that. And I'll just insert it, and there we go. You can see there's animation playing. This was animation I created in InDesign, exported with In5, and then now it's on a website. And so if I hit preview on my post, and I never had to deal with FTP, right? That just came from my computer. There it is. And now, of course, I can clean up, have the height properly adjusted and things like that. But you can see I have this on a site and it's ready to go, and all I would have to do is hit publish. That's how quickly I was able to publish it using the WordPress tool. Okay, so that is an option. Packaging as a mobile app. Now, unfortunately, I've got a little bit of bad news here because this used to be super easy. And we had a fantastic course on this, one that Keith Gilbert also did. And we used Phonegap build. So Phonegap is a library that Adobe has the rights to. And what it allows you to do is take HTML, any kind of HTML, and build it into a mobile app. So you don't have to, write the iOS language and the Android language and all that. You can just build a content-based app with HTML using a tool like InDesign and Infi and package it. And we had this whole process to make it super easy. Phonegap build, all you had to do was upload the file. And we walked you through the technical things, and it was free with the Creative Cloud subscription, and Adobe just decided to close it. And so unfortunately that option is gone. Now that doesn't mean that options to turn HTML into a mobile app are gone. They still exist. We just don't have super detailed instructions on them, and they're going to cost more than free. Now that may be worth it in a lot of cases, depending on what you're doing. So that is an option if you really want to be in the App Store. I have a couple other options that I want to mention if you're publishing. So there is also a web app. So the same process that I used to create this web content and put it online, I would do that same process, except that when I export, whether I'm exporting from the Easy Export Wizard, I could choose web app. Or if I'm using the full dialog, I would choose one of the web app options from the output format. So in choosing that, what that does is give me a save to home screen. And so let me show you quickly from our website what that'll look like. It'll be faster than me uploading everything again. Oops. And that's not a website. There we go, infi.us. So if I go down to this bypass the web store, or excuse me, the App Store option, you can see details on how this works. But basically what Infi does is if it sees you're not on an app, it gives you a message about that to send it to your device. And then when you actually open it on a device, it gives you instructions on how to save it to the home screen. Once you've done that, it gets saved on your home screen with a custom icon, and it opens just like an app. And you can combine that with caching so that it actually gets saved on the local device after they've viewed it completely one time. And so that can be a good solution for some cases. And then another way to distribute privately is what's called a sales enablement solution. And this often is a lot of times what people are wanting to do when they are tasked with creating an app. They're needing to distribute sales content to salespeople, or in cases I know, like sometimes large restaurant chains are distributing recipes to kitchens across the country, and they'll use a solution like this. They can use InDesign to create the content. They can export it with Infi, making it fully interactive. And then they'll use a sales enablement platform like Vablet. And what that lets them do is that basically connects the marketing and department creative to the entire sales team, or in the second case, it's all the chefs, and it can push that content to iPads. So you can have different groups. I use iPads as an example. It can be different devices and it can be viewable on all kinds of stuff, but often the preferred mechanism is iPads. So yeah, you can push the content and it automatically gets there. You can have different groups. So different groups get If somebody's on the East Coast and they're pitching to different clients than the West Coast, you can send different material to them, and it goes to their device. It automatically gets saved offline, which is a big deal, and then they can open that on the device and access it anytime. So that may be another option if that fits the project that you're looking for. Okay, so that is, a sampling. You might have seen as we were going through some of the Infi menus. There was stuff we didn't even talk about today or yesterday, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of just the breadth of the interactivity and the kind of stuff you can create. And I will open it up for questions. So please just, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions, or Myra or April, if you want to pick out questions from the chat, that'd be great too.
I had a question.
Yes, please.
This is a lot for me. The whole thing. It's amazing, and I just want to say thank you first of all. But you mentioned a video, and I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday. So I missed what you probably maybe already covered. But the video courses that you offer, is that part of the subscription to the software? Is that all part of it as one, so that you can kind of go through and teach yourself how to use a lot of the stuff that you've kind of broadly covered today?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Actually, the video courses are separate. There's at least one free one now. We might offer some other free ones. There are free videos within the courses that we put on YouTube, and we have other tutorials on YouTube, and we have lots of articles, and there's also a free course. I'm sure Myra could put that in the chat. There's like a 22 lesson course with a bunch of stuff in it.
Which course? Sorry, I missed it.
Oh, the Infi course, the Mastering Digital Publishing course.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think I already posted that link. I'll double check.
I'm sure it came up already in the chat. But yeah, if you can post that again so that it's fresh there. Yeah, so the courses are an additional cost. They can be purchased outright individually, or you can subscribe and get the entire library. And there's two different levels. So if you just want the videos, it's one plan. And then if you want videos plus like exercise files and downloadable transcripts and discussions with the course author, that's a different plan. And if you're able and you have the time, you can just sign up for a month, binge everything we got, and then cancel, and then come back later and see when we have new courses. You can sign up again. So you could potentially binge 10 courses for like $30 if you've got the time and the willingness and the headspace to absorb it.
Gotcha.
So yeah, thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Actually, a couple of questions. The first one is when I try to sell, these what N5 can do at work, and I think N5 is great. I do have a hard time explaining it to my boss, my boss's boss, what we can do with it, because it can do pretty much anything. And so I'm wondering, is there like a way to phrase what it is it can do, or some sort of like, some kind of quick way to refer to it? Like I've said, interactive experiences and their eyes glaze over. Different things doesn't seem to really ring a bell with people. What do you suggest for trying to sell this in when you need to convince people in a corporate environment that this is worthwhile and that it's really effective and helpful? So that's one question.
Thank you.
And my other question is, what do you think the future is of interactivity and interactive capabilities within InDesign? I'm just, because InDesign, Adobe seems to always be coming up with these different things. There was Adobe Muse. Right now there's XD, all these different things. They come and they go. InDesign seems to stay. And I'm wondering, are they really committed to maintaining all the features that are already there?
Okay, thank you. Those are great questions. I'll take the second one first because I think I can answer it more quickly. The InDesign team, I think, is acutely aware that if they remove stuff, they make people angry. And occasionally we catch them doing that. They don't realize that they're taking away stuff we're using. And if you're subscribed to my email list, I basically, like, when somebody tells me, like this happened with the navigation points, was one of the recent ones in video.
I sent you that one. Yeah.
Did you send me that one?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. They removed that, and I, put it on user voice, and I send out an email to, I've got like 10,000 people on the list, and a bunch of people vote for it. And they put comments in and say, hey, I'm using it. And the InDesign team is like, whoa. And they get right on it. And that's happened with a couple of things. And so that's one of our best tools, is to just show them, hey, a lot of people are using this. And we've been able to get them to bring stuff back, oftentimes in dot releases. So within a matter of months, not even having to wait for the next big release. So that's one good thing to do there. So I think they're pretty reticent to remove anything. I hear your concern. I mean, I have the same experience as an Adobe user with new products. I have a lack of trust with those. But I do think millions of people rely on InDesign. And generally, when they remove something, it's a mistake. They didn't realize people were using it. And when they hear the backlash, they put it back. It's just a matter of making our voices heard collectively. So it doesn't sound like a developer here or there that's like, hey, I have a script that uses this. When I put it out to that email list and like 100 people vote on it, they move. So that's one of the best things we could do. To your first question, actually, I'm going to be open to suggestions in terms of how you sell this, because this has been one of my big challenges with the product, quite honestly. Yeah, it can do so much. It's hard to figure out what to call it. I do want to, at some point, I've had this plan for a long time, to put out a convince your boss guide that kind of goes through point by point and goes through all the objections, and sort of gives you talking points to go to your boss. So hopefully I've got a lot more help with me. Maybe that's something we can do this year. But it is challenging, and I think it's always a matter of finding out what is their language, and what speaks to them, what's the pain point for them. And so, for example, one thing I've found, because my audience is designers, it's not necessarily, indirectly it's designers' bosses, but directly it's designers. I'm trying to talk to you guys. And so, what I realized over time is that I was saying InDesign to HTML5, because I was coming from this world of being a designer developer, and I was using Flash. And so everybody was like, HTML5 is going to replace Flash. And so, when I started out, I was like, well, I'll just say it does HTML5 and people will understand the expansiveness, right? Like I showed you, it can be a Flipbook, it could be a mobile, but I was not speaking to the right audience. So, what I came upon was, I started thinking about, well, how do I discover products? And one of the ways I do that is I have a problem and I go searching for something. And so most of my Google searches are keyword broken, keyword not working. And for me, thinking about designers, one of the things that came up was interactive PDF. That's what people are used to exporting. And as I talked about yesterday, none of the interactive stuff works in it for various reasons. And so that's one way I've tried to address it, where I'm not bringing up HTML, which, a lot of designers, their brain just shuts off, understandably, because they hear that and they think that's code. I'm not going to touch that. And so I think that's part of the trick. It's another way I think of it is it's productizing a developer. So this is an alternative to, say, having to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a developer, because it's taking developer tools and giving them to you as the designer. And also taking that element out of the process, or at least eliminating part of it, makes your feedback loop a lot faster. Like you're not having to communicate with somebody what you want something to look like, and then waiting for them to finish and then giving them feedback and going through this review process. You're just making it and seeing it work. And then so you can just have that process with your boss. So, I mean, those are some of the things, but it's still a big challenge in terms of, you know, getting a handle, and maybe it's a matter of focusing on one thing that's really important to them instead of the kitchen sink, instead of saying, well, it's going to make this thing, but then, you know, we could also make this thing that we're not making now, and we could also make this thing. Maybe it's just, you know, what's the thing that's going to get them, you know, get them moving. And then once you have it, you start making other stuff, and you say, by the way, you could also make this, and tell them, you know, why that's going. But maybe it's just a matter of finding what's that thing that's important to them that gets you in the door.
Great.
And Justin, I'd like to add, I'm going through this right now, and one of the things that I was able to negotiate is, can we just get the smallest like group license available, so I can create a couple projects, see how it goes, test the waters before everybody on our design team starts jumping in. And they bought it. And so I'm working on projects 2 and 3. The first project was a hit with our client, with the client that I work on. And the license, it doesn't, I mean, Justin, close your ears. It doesn't cost a ton of money, which is awesome, because it does allow you to kind of dive in feet first and try it out without a huge substantial, you know, hit to the budget. So.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shannon.
I'll toss in a little bit here too, which is a basic of marketing. Don't try to market a generality. You can't sell an entire package. Your boss has a problem. You can sell a solution to that problem. And don't say Infi does all this stuff. Just say, you know, this problem we have when we're trying to get this website updated or this page, there's a great product that'll do that. We can do it much faster. That you can sell, because that the boss understands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
I think
I guess I'm sorry, I was just gonna say that actually is kind of what happened with us. And the way that I found Infi was, someone had an idea that they wanted to do a flip book. And they came to my group and said, can you make a flip book? And I said, I don't know, let me Google this. And that's how I found Infi, was Googling how to make a flip book. And that's how we got in the door. I guess what I'm trying to do now is, I'm past that point. We're in the door. I want my whole team to get it. I want to get, go to higher levels of the license. And I think that's where I am now, is trying to sell. I'm in the door. We made sort of a sell on it, and I want to take it to another level. But I take your point. It's still pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I think if you haven't already, you know, start selling to your colleagues, to your designers, like, and then they can go to the boss and say, hey, I really want to make stuff, you know, like Maximilian's doing. So maybe that's another option.
Yep.
Heather has had her hand raised, and so I want to give her a chance to.
Hey, Justin, how are you?
Hey, good, thanks.
Thank you for this. It's definitely a great product, and I've kind of been following along for quite a while and getting ready to make the dive in. You talked yesterday very briefly about password protection. Can you explain what you can do on that end for maybe subscribers of a certain publication, where you can have some things available to subscribers and maybe some things available to everybody?
Mm-hmm. So what you're talking about is a slightly more complicated case. Let me point you to a kind of a starting point for all this. So Myra put this link in the chat. This is the digital publishing mastery course, basically. In here, there is an article on publishing to the web. And in this article, I describe the different ways that you can add password protection. So you kind of recognize this is doing the FTP. And then, Let me get down. There's password protection. So one thing you can do.
Are you trying to
and
share your
if you haven't-
screen?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thanks for thanks for telling me that. I'm sure that was really interesting without seeing my screen.
Maybe I'm the only one. I don't know.
No. It's
Oh, there we go.
I forgot. So thank you for mentioning it. Okay, so this is the course. That's the URL that's in there. It's just ajarproductions.com/in5 course. It should be in the chat, and I'm on the publishing to web lesson, which you can find in the menu on the left or on the right, excuse me. And there's a section on password protection. So the simplest version is you can password protect directories. The more sophisticated version that you're talking about, where you have subscribers and they're paying for it and they're getting access when they pay for that. That's a case where I have a complex course on how to do that. And in this case, I use a WordPress tool. It's not the only way to do it, but it goes through and shows you how to put that content behind a paywall, because it's a multi-step process.
Okay.
But as long as your content sits there, and I show in the course that even if there's ways to set it up, so even if somebody knew the URL of your N5 content, that still is protected. So it takes a few steps to fully insulate it, but it can be done. And even if you don't, that course uses WordPress and a plugin called Wishlist. Even if you don't use that particular method, you might be able to see parallels with another tool.
Sure. And so that first option will allow you to just give everybody one password and just say, when you go to this site, type in this password. Is that kind of just a nice, simple password protection? The other option?
You can do that. And you can also make it sophisticated enough to have multiple users and passwords. So that's just part of most of the the most common web server management software is cPanel, and they just have this way of adding access, and you add a user and you add a password. And so theoretically you had multiple users, and if you were manually tracking it, if somebody's subscription was over, you could delete their access. So it kind of depends on what stage you're at and what you're doing, if it's something where it makes sense for you to manually manage it, or if you want to like spend a little money on something like the Wishlist plugin and have it manage it for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Because that's a complete system that will like take payments and will manage the access. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. What other questions do people have?
Hey, Justin, it's Shannon again.
Hey, Shannon.
I put this in the chat, but are pixel perfect exported documents accessible?
That is a good question, and certainly that comes up. So often when I get asked about accessibility, it's asked as if it's a binary option. Myra actually put a great thing in the chat. That's another thing we didn't cover. There's a tool called the Mobile Article Explorer. And what that lets you do is, even if you do pixel perfect text, so text rendered as images, it will take your content, your actual text, and you can attach it to some object like a button. And when they tap on it, it'll open a light box with all of the text. And so that lets you preserve the InDesign layout, but have like fully accessible text. So that's worth looking at. Accessibility is actually a spectrum. And so there's things that you can do in setting up your document that are more accessible than other things. In5 does a lot of things under the hood to try and make things accessible. And so like if you render text as images, it will add as much of that text as it reasonably can to the alt attribute, so that a screen reader can see it under the hood. A screen reader is a thing that, like, for instance, a visually impaired person would use to access a website. It would actually be reading it out loud. And so it can see some of that content and read it out loud. But obviously, if it's live text, you can read all of it. you can do little tricks, like you could use the free split text extension that we have to break your text up by paragraphs, and then each paragraph would have its own alt attribute, and you would actually get a lot more of that content screen read. And you know, in terms of formats you choose, like if you choose the Flipbook, obviously that navigation is less accessible because it's a visual thing that somebody actually has to see and peel. So there's a certain amount you can do in setup to make it more accessible. And there's an article, also Myra right on top of it, ahead of me, put in the chat pod on 508 compliance, basically with In5. And I think at some point we'll do a full course on that. But it's basically just understanding the things you can do to make something more or less accessible. And it is something I hear about and something that will evolve in the tool and we'll find ways to get better. But it's always going to take a backseat to In5's main priorities, which are preserving layout and interactivity from InDesign. And so the more you have of that, you know, there's a compromise with accessibility. And so if accessibility is a big priority and you want to use In5, then you want to make choices like having live text and maybe setting up your fonts ahead of time so you can have beautiful live text, and you know, having a page format that maybe scrolls so it's readily accessible to a screen reader instead of, you know, the page peel effect and stuff like that.
Yep. Okay. No,
So,
very helpful. I just wanted to double check, but thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. I get that question all the time, and yet I still have not developed a short answer for it.
Well, your long answer made sense.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great questions. I see Matt is asking about a fillable form, and Myra's right on top of it there. What we generally recommend using with a fillable form, while In5 will export form elements, and there are certain things you can do with those, to actually submit data and have it stored, you need a backend. And In5, this is web developer talk now, is all front end. It's all stuff that's rendered by the web browser. It's not communicating with your server really. And so that's what you need to actually save data. Other than simple data, we can save stuff, and if somebody comes back in the same browser, they can see it, but you can't see it as the content creator. So the simplest thing that we usually recommend is to use something like Google Forms. And just the way we embedded the YouTube video yesterday, just embed that form in your document. And then that way it gets saved in Google Forms, it gets saved in a spreadsheet, and you have easy access to that data. And Myra's put all those links in the chat pod. So yeah, and people get more sophisticated and they sometimes customize their output and they connect to their database. But for most people, if you're making a contact form or something simple, we would recommend using Google Forms.
Can you talk a little bit about exporting for ebook for the marketplace? For
ebook for the marketplace. In most cases, what I recommend using there is a fixed layout EPUB, because most marketplaces are going to accept that. There are certain things you can do that work with In5 that will take an HPUB format, which In5 can export. And you can, I've sort of discussed there are options to turn it into a mobile app. But if you're looking at something like the iBooks store, is that what it's called? Whatever Apple's store is, then a fixed layout EPUB is just like a super simple way to do that. And it doesn't cost you anything extra beyond InDesign. So that's what I recommend for that.
Hi, Justin, it's Matt. Got a question from a long-time user of flippingbook.com for my clients' flipping books. And a couple of big ones I've just done recently have really pushed the limits of the interactive PDFs. Obviously, multi-state buttons don't last. They have to be reapplied as go-to page links and that sort of thing. Interestingly, I found the other day that a fully interactive PDF form, an order form, isn't interactive in the flipping book on screen, but once it's downloaded, it still preserves its capability. I'm kind of, with flipping book, obviously, I have the option, just as with In5, to either zip the package and FTP it for a client's website. At the moment, the advantage I have is I can also host it on my flipping book cloud account if the client wants to link to it. Is that an option anywhere in In5? That seems to, I don't know if I've got the picture, but it's either zip, save an FTP or upload to your own server. Is there anywhere in between? Because I'd really like to start moving more across to In5 because of its capabilities.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as of right now, it's something that I've toyed with for a while. We don't offer a hosting option. So it is really up to you to have a place to host it. I do, in that free course, I talk about options for hosting if you don't have a website yet, that can make it really easy. So if you're motivated to do In5, you can do that. If having the hosting is a breaking point, then it's unfortunately something we just don't have. And I have looked at it, and it's just such a different business from what we're doing, being focused in InDesign to being like a hosting kind of platform. So yeah, so if you're motivated, and what you're saying about it not maintaining that stuff makes a lot of sense, because I mean, what those platforms are basically doing is creating an image of every page, and then when you're in their platform, you're creating interactivity that sits on top of the images, right? They're not actually taking stuff that you created in InDesign, and then when you're downloading it, it's actually downloading the PDF as opposed to those image representations of the PDF that you're seeing in the Flipbook. So the major difference with In5 is that, you know, it has a direct relationship with InDesign. So it's replicating all the objects from InDesign, and that interactivity is in there. It's very different from a flipping book format and from what DPS used to do, which is basically take a screenshot of the page and then start putting interactivity on it. And in In5's case, it's all woven in together. So I've had questions, like even from InDesign experts, who were like, how much interactivity can you have? Like what's the limit? I was like, there's no limit. Like whatever you do in InDesign, it goes to the output, you know? And if it doesn't work, send it to us. We'll try and figure out why it's not working. But there's not even a theoretical limit, because what it's trying to do is translate InDesign as opposed to, adding stuff on top of screenshots of PDF pages.
Great, thank you. Quick supplementary question. Multi-state objects have frightened me for a long time, and I saw from yesterday's session that they're really integral to what In5 can do. When you were playing with your, I think it was the pop-up buttons here a little earlier, trying to grab something that was hiding underneath, could you also, if you've done the right thing and properly named all your components, could you also use the layers menu to click through and find out if something's sitting blocking what you want to do, or you've got the order wrong?
Definitely, that's a great point. Let me switch to InDesign, and maybe I can even show you. And if you auto create some of that stuff, you'll see it in the layers. So if you auto create a pop-up, it's creating that layer. The auto created ones are the ones with the brackets around them. And yeah, if you happen to have something sitting somewhere, let's go to this page, because I didn't mess with this one. So this one is kind of challenging, right? Because there's a button, but we can see there are groups in there. And of course, most of you know that you can click these little rectangles. Let me try and make all this more visible. You can click these rectangles on the right, and they select things. You can twirl open the groups and select things in the group. Where's our pop-up? That's pop-up locations. I think, okay, here I've got a pop-up, and so there you can see I have that selected. One trick with multi-state objects working in the layers is they only show the active layer. So all you can see is empty and what's inside there. Now, if I were to go to the object states panel and switch to pop-up, the pop-up object state, and then go back to my layers, now it's the pop-up state. And now I've got all kinds of stuff in there. I've got my buttons and all the button content. You can see I can go into the normal state of the button. And if this had a rollover state, there'd be a rollover. So you can go deep in that, but it's only going to show the active states. And so, I mean, I think Myra can attest to the fact that, when we get complicated files, especially ones that, where they're multi-state objects that are more than 2 states, we have trouble finding things. But the layers panel is a good place to look. Yeah, and I kind of wish there was something better, maybe.
Is that a help if you find you need to change the order of multi-state animations and things? Do you need to do
I
it
mean,
through?
yeah, you can move stuff around, going in and out of multi-state objects. Let's say if you want to move something from one state to another, that's a little trickier. You might want to actually cut it and then switch the state, and then the object states panel has a paste into button on the bottom. You want to use that. So cut it out of one state, switch states, and then use paste into to move it in. There's also, if somebody knows what it is, there's I think this is now free. There's like an object states assistant panel or something that Martino, is that his name, has written. I swear somebody on here might know what it is. Let me do a quick search and see if I can find it. Yes, his site is Automatician something. Let me share my screen again just so you can see the site. If you end up working with object states a lot, I would definitely recommend this object states assistant panel. So this is his site, and this is where you find it, the object states assistant. And it's, yeah, I'm still figuring out how to pronounce the name. Automatication. Okay. And so what it does is add a bunch of useful tools. So somebody like, I know Bob Levine just swears by this tool if you've got to work with a lot of object states. And I believe, hopefully it works on the current version, or if it doesn't, it should soon. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Right, thanks, Justin. Brilliant.
Justin, there was a question. Oh, sorry.
Last question, okay?
All right. Does anybody have one?
There was a question on pricing for nonprofits.
Oh, that's a good question. I've stripped away basically most of the discounts and stuff, because what we had was a bunch of complexity. And where we've focused heavily on support. So when you hear me saying like, you have a problem, send us your files, and we dig through the multi-state objects, we really do that. And so Myra's raising her hand. She does a lot of that. And so I just stopped offering discounts because of the complexity, and because we're basically opening ourselves up to do a huge amount of support regardless of who's sending us the file. And so it just costs a lot for us to support it. So the basic thing, I think we were talking about educational pricing before the session too. The best way to get a discount is if you have a lot of people using it, it gets cheaper the more people you have using it. The enterprise one, which is 7 users or more, gives you the cheapest price per user. And if you start getting up to like 20 or 30, I mean, I can even talk about like creating a plan for you and making it even a little bit less. But that's the only discount we offer at this stage. And there's no like special offers. There's not going to be a sale on Infi or anything like that. We're just like making the product and doing our darndest to give you great support. So yeah, there's no hidden discounts or anything. You won't ever get an email saying it's 50% off today or anything like that. It just is what it is.
Okay, no Black Friday sales then, huh?
Well, sorry about that. But
Okay.
Thanks everybody for your attention and your great questions. I appreciate it.
And thank you. This has been a great 2 days. I love the way this worked, and based on the registrations, I think that the universe of users out there loved it too. Thank you very much. So we're going to jump into raffles. Somebody is going to win Infi. Let's see who that is. First of all, I should say that yesterday when I did the raffles, can everybody see Interactivity in InDesign?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. Yesterday when I did the raffles, I selected the screen to share, but didn't hit share screen. So all the time that I thought people were looking at this particular screen and seeing what the raffles were and all of that, you guys were just looking at me and I didn't realize it. So I apologize for that. So we've just done the second day of adding interactivity. And our next presentation, as Justin mentioned, is Keith Gilbert's going to be here next month. He's going to be talking about Creative Cloud libraries, always on the third Thursday of the month. That's March 18th. And I'm going to put into the, wait a minute here. I'm going to put into the chat the link for next month's meeting. Okay, so these are the raffle prizes, and we're going to go bottom up. You must be present to win. Important, so that we can move along. If we don't announce yourself, if your name is called. If you don't say anything after 5 seconds, we'll move on to the next person. Alan Gilbertson is pretty good about that. He's the timekeeper on that.
Ready to go.
All right. The first one is Adobe Stock. There's some rules about that. We need your Adobe ID to be able to put them in there, not your password, your Adobe ID. I have put everybody's name in this wheel here. You can see the names at the bottom.
Good links.
And we are now going to see who's going to get Adobe Stock. Monica, are you here?
Time is up.
Okay, we're doing it again. Mimi, are you here?
That's it. Time is up.
Denise A.
Oh boy, we're not doing well today.
Shannon.
I'm here.
We know Shannon's here. Yeah.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Okay, very good. Okay, we're going to move on to Mighty Deals. This is, they sell things like fonts and Photoshop actions and stuff, and you get $50 to spend however you want. Liz, are you here?
She said she doesn't have a microphone.
Is Liz here?
She's here.
She's here. She's in chat.
It's saying she doesn't have a mic. She's here.
Okay, and she, Liz, she wants it, right?
She said yes.
Okay, great. All right, you got it, Liz.
Woo! She's on mute.
So in motion hosting, MLP.
Yes, here I am.
And you want it?
Sure.
Okay, great, great. You got it. A year of
Thank you.
hosting.
Yay.
Highly recommended. They're very good.
Okay. Medical no-touch infrared digital thermometers that maybe are worth $188.12. But maybe not.
Or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, depends on what website you go to. PCB presentation. That might have been FCB. I think I typed it wrong.
Oh, that's me. That's Charlotte. Yep. I changed my name. It was FCB. Yeah.
Okay. So you want it? Are you?
Sure.
Okay. Postage is free if you're in the U.S. If you're outside the U.S., I'm going to ask you to pay for postage. Are we cool?
Yep. I'm in the U.S.
Okay. I am putting my info in the chat. You can email me your information as to where to send it.
Thank you.
Okay, should we do another thermometer? Kathy, are you here?
I'm here, but I don't need a thermometer. I have one, thank you.
Okay, great. Susanna.
I'm here.
All right, do you want it?
Sure.
Okay, you got it. Again, my email is in the chat. Send me where I should send it. Okay, and this is the prize everybody's been waiting for.
Drum roll.
Right. Oh, this is interesting. Jason. Are you here?
No, Jason.
No, Jason. All right.
Another chance.
Kay Jones.
Time's up.
Josh,
Hello, I'm here.
you want it?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. That's the right
Lucky
answer.
guy.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Wow.
great. Okay, so that's the end of the raffles. Reminding you that Creative Cloud next month. One more big thank you to Justin and to Myra for handling the chat so efficiently. This has really been a great 2 days.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks so much for having us. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Session.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Justin.
Good to see you
Enjoy
all.
your weekend.
Bye.
Super awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks from Australia, guys. Really, really appreciated it. Learned a lot.